All right, let's do this. So welcome to the Youper Farmer. Again, here to do a video, like I promised, a how-to video on brewing cider. For tonight, we have a Star Cut cider, the Octorock hard cider. Again, brewed here in Michigan with Michigan apples. I've actually never had this one before, but it should be quite interesting. And I felt it was kind of fitting for the activities for today, because we're going to be brewing up, or showing you how to brew up, some beginner hard cider. That's good, sweet, a little dry. So, like I said, we're going to brew up my top secret batch of hard cider. This is one I give to family and friends. A lot of people say it is really, really good. And it's one that I've made many times. So here, for the first time, for the world to know, here's the secret to making what a lot of people say is one of the best ciders, hard ciders they've ever had. First, apple juice. Next ingredient, sugar. And then finally, yeast. That's it. That's all that goes in there. That's all the secret ingredients. Apple juice, sugar, yeast. There's nothing else added to it. No flavors, no anything really complicating it. The couple of things that I will note that I think actually improves it. One, there's not a lot of sugar we add. It's about 3/4 cup per gallon. So this is about 1.5 cups of sugar, because I'm going to be making 2 gallons worth of hard cider tonight. As far as the apple juice, I really enjoy the Indian Summer. The main reason is, let's see if we can get it up close. If you actually look at the ingredients, they do something different. They use apple juice and apple juice concentrate, and then the vitamin C additive, which is more like a preservative. Not a lot of places will actually use apple juice to reconstitute their juice concentrate. It really seems to bring out a lot more flavor, more apples to it. As far as the yeast, this one is the Red Star yeast. And the only reason I have this one is because it was actually on sale. I bought it a couple years back. I do enjoy using it. It works, but you can see it was still got the sticker for 25 bucks. I think I paid 12. The guy had bought in a bunch of bulk yeast, and they started to expire. So he was given them for a sale, which helped me out quite a bit. So there's the basic supplies you need. Let's look at the equipment. All right, for equipment, you need some sort of jar to ferment stuff in. I bought this one at Walmart. I think it was under 20 bucks. Really nice. It's got a spigot, which really helps for filling the bottles, and the treb that forms, or the waste product of the yeast that forms at the bottom, sits below the spout, so you don't get any of that inside your final product. This one, actually, I was able to drill a hole inside there with a glass drill bit and install a airlock. It actually turns out it's not needed, because this brand actually has these little holes that are for overpressurization. So it actually lets the pressure seep out. If you know anything about hazmat and chemicals and gases and chemistry, the CO2 that the yeast produces is actually heavier than air. So as long as this is pretty well sealed up, it'll fill this whole chamber with CO2, but oxygen that usually spoils your ciders or your brews won't really be able to get in. Now, if you were to open this up while it's fermenting, even do a little hand wave movement, or a slight breeze would blow across, it'd have enough to blow out the CO2 and get oxygen in. But as long as once this is set, you just leave it, you really won't have any problems. I didn't know it had these overpressurization holes, so I actually went ahead and drilled and put in an airlock. If your container doesn't have these overpressurization holes, it has a solid gasket, you're going to want some way to let the gases expire. A easy solution, you can actually take the cap off of your juice bottles, drill a hole and actually fit your airlock in there. You do need an airlock. I think that's the one thing I would recommend splurging on. You can do balloons. You can do the burping method where every day you just kind of release the pressure. Honestly though, airlock costs about $2. The rubber stopper costs about $1. Well worth the price. Plus it can give you a lot of data about how your brew is doing. Other thing you need, some type of sanitizer. Again, you don't need this big of one. The same guy who sold the bulk yeast had bulk sanitizer, and he gave that, sold that to me for a very good price. And I think it was under 20 bucks. I use One Step. The nice thing about this is you don't have to rinse anything out. You can use bleach. There's other types of sanitizing products that you can buy. The problem is when you use them, sometimes you have to rinse them out and wash them out. The One Step, put it in there, swish it around, let it sit for about 10 minutes, dump it out, and you can start brewing. You don't have to rinse it out. What you'll find is that rinsing it out, you can introduce microbes into the brew, and that's what we don't want. And they're not really needed, but it helps, a small little saucepan, and that's to make our simple syrup. So I'm going to clear this stuff out and we'll start brewing. All right, the first step for making a very successful hard cider, any type of home brew, is to realize you're controlling infection. You're controlling bacteria. You're controlling what type of microbe gets into your brew. So everything you do from this point forward is about cleanliness, sanitizing, sterilizing. Yes, there's ways around it. There's tricks where you don't necessarily have to sanitize stuff. I've known enough people who simply just washing this container with soap and hot water would be more than enough, in their opinion, to sanitize and clean it. In my opinion, that doesn't work. So I've mixed up my One Step. I'm going to go ahead and just add some to this. Oops. And I'll do this next part off camera, but you're going to want to shake this up and get that sanitizer everywhere, including purging some out of the nozzle to make sure that gets sanitized, the cover gets sanitized. Every inch of this has to be touched because we want this to be 100% sanitized. Some people just shake it up real quick, dump it out, call it good. I let it sit for 10 minutes so the chemical can really start working. Anything else you might use, like a stirring spoon, make sure that stays inside your sanitizer. Get it nice and good and wetted down so that way whatever you're working with, again, will be the cleanest and most sanitary there is. We don't want any other outside microbes to come in. So I'm going to take this off camera and shake it up a little bit, and then I'll be right back. Alright, I got that all mixed up, made sure every part of my fermenting jar has been touched by the sanitizer. Then we're going to go ahead and start our timer for 10 minutes. And again, this is a bit of an overkill. A lot of people just say as long as the sanitizer ends up hitting that the surface at least once, you should be good. I like it to sit there as long, about 10 minutes, to really make sure that it's working nice. Now let's talk about the other thing that people forget to sanitize. So we're using apple juice from the store. The nice thing about this apple juice is that it is already pre-sanitized. They usually use either radiation, they use heat, ultraviolet, they use some process to kill almost all the microbes. Sometimes they'll use a chemical additive, something to deter yeast and bacteria growth. That is one thing you do at the checkout, and make sure that the juice you buy doesn't have one of those agents. Like a potassium sorbate is one of the popular ones. There's other ones out there that will specifically kill your yeast. And they add it usually to fresh cider, fresh apple cider that's squeezed. You can buy it like Walmart. They'll add some sort of agent in there to kill off wild yeast. If you do want to do your own pressed apples or pressed berries or wherever you're getting juice from that's not from a commercially sealed bottle, I recommend boiling it. I'm boiling it for at least 10 minutes. And there's a lot of controversy to that. One, people believe that it destroys flavor and nutrients and vitamins, which it does. Boiling will destroy some of the vitamins. But again, it's all about that you control what microbes go in there, and you're the one who picks what you're going to add. Squeezing some apples or squishing grapes, adding yeast does a pretty good job. There's some chemicals that you can add, again, like the potassium sorbate, that will kill yeast, and then there's a process to get that potassium sorbate not to kill your yeast. Honestly, boiling it for a good rolling boil for 10 minutes, any liquid you're about to ferment, does the trick. Do let it cool down, though, before you pitch your yeast or put the yeast inside, or else it'll be too hot and it'll kill your yeast. So do watch out for that. What we're going to do in the meantime while we wait for this to finish sanitizing is we're going to make a very simple sugar. We're going to make like a sugar syrup, not a true sugar syrup, but we're basically just going to dissolve all of our sugar into some of the apple juice in a container, again, that should be sanitized. So I'm going to wait for this stuff to all be sanitized out, and then I'll come back and we'll boil up some of the sugar, and then we'll add it all to here and just finish the process live on camera. All right, as you can see, I've added the sugar to the apple juice. Both this saucepan and my stir spoon have been sanitized. You leave the liquid, my opinion, you leave the liquid in your fermenter until you're absolutely ready to mix all the products together. So we just keep stirring. So you don't want it to bring it to a boil. You're just heating it until that sugar dissolves. Because again, the spoon is sterilized or sanitized. The pot is sanitized. The liquid is sanitized. The sugar, all right, it's not really sanitized. There's no good way except for boiling it for 10 minutes. That's probably the only thing that I haven't really sanitized is the sugar. So we're just going to stir this up until all the sugar dissolves. Again, we're not going to bring it to a boil or any high temps. You can see the sugar should take pretty quick to dissolve. That's not a lot of sugar that we poured in there. And when I'm talking about sanitization, realize that if I was to set this spoon down, it's now contaminated because I didn't sanitize this surface. I also don't want to put the spoon back inside my sanitation water. There might be something that I forgot to sanitize. I'm going to wait a little bit or at least wash it down. So keep that clean too. Because if I stick this spoon in there, I just drop some water in there or some of the apple juice, so now it's not technically as sanitized as it should be. We'd have to start all over again, make new sanitizer. This one step, the one problem with it is it doesn't last that long. It uses oxygen based to sanitize stuff, which works great. But this stuff you really can't really store this for, a week or months or whatnot. Kind of once I'm done here, I'm pretty much done. So I'll just throw that out. All right, it looks like the sugar is pretty much dissolved. Again, we're not taking it up to high heats. So I think I'm going to shut this off. And we'll let it cool down just a little bit so it doesn't overheat our yeast, although it shouldn't with adding about 2 gallons into there, about 1.5 gallons about, and then adding this syrup solution. It should definitely not be too hot, but again, we'll go ahead and turn off our heat. Take our spoon, make sure we don't set it down on anything, stick it in. I won't need the spoon again, so I'm just safe putting this in the sink. So we'll be right back to mix it all into our fermenter and show you the final step. All right, our jar has been finished being sanitized. We're ready to add everything and finish off the brew. So the first thing I do is add at least the remainder of the apple juice, whether or not it's what's left or 1 full gallon. This creates a thermal shock, and depending on the container you're brewing in, some containers, if you put a hot liquid in there, like our simple syrup, if we didn't let it cool down, it could actually cause trouble for the container. So we add our simple syrup here. I'm going to see how much if I can keep from spilling too much. Not too bad. A little bit on the side there. not bad at all. All right, now when I fill it up with the next bit of apple juice, the next gallon, we want to leave some head space. You try to avoid leaving a ton, but you don't want to leave too little in case your yeast has an explosive growth. If it does, it sometimes can come right up outside your fermenter. It's kind of a pain to clean. So I'm going to fill it to almost full right down here. I'm not going to get exactly 2 gallons out of this. I'll get a little bit less than that. Still plenty of hard cider, and I'll just have a little bit of apple juice left over. So grab my next gallon. And this is supposed to hold 2 gallons, but again, we're leaving an air space, an air gap. And that helps the yeast, and again, prevents some unfortunate reactions when it comes to making this. Let's see, that's probably good enough. Again, almost, there's just a little bit left down there in the bottom, but again, I want to leave a little bit of an air gap. As far as yeast goes, I recommend just following what's on the package. This stuff, if you buy the big bag of it, if you're gonna do a lot of brewing, it says you only use about a half a teaspoon per gallon. This stuff is technically expired. I don't know if you can see the date or not. It actually expired in 2018. But it's still good. The yeast I keep in the refrigerator, keep it dry. Still works just fine, but I add 1 teaspoon per gallon instead of the 1/4 to a half that it recommends. Now here's one of my secrets I'm going to share with you, what seems to work for me. I don't stir the yeast up. And a lot of people say hydrolyze your yeast first, which means you add it to some fluid first, get it fermenting, get it bubbling or proofing, sometimes they'll call it, and then add it. I don't. I just go ahead and I put it right on top, let it work itself in. 2 reasons. One, it makes it a lot easier. I find when I stir it up, a lot of times the yeast will get stuck to the spoon, it'll clump up on me. This way, you can kind of see it, the yeast just naturally starts settling down on its own, and yeast does need a little bit of oxygen to kind of kick off its fermenting process. So by having it up here, it's going to grab onto that little bit it needs. The only thing I do now is I seal this up, and that's pretty much it. I'll add some water to my airlock there, so that it's all completely sealed system. Little bubbles will start popping out. It'll look great. That's it. That's how you make my world famous, my wonderful, delicious, homemade hard apple cider. Now, here's my recommendation. This is a simple process. This is something you can easily go out for dollars, pennies, under probably 30 bucks. You could make easily a gallon. Whoops. A gallon with the method I showed, where you just drill a hole in the cover there, put the airlock in, secure it. You don't need brewer's yeast, although a little packet of it costs about $1 online. You can use bread yeast. You don't have to use the Indian Summer. I do really like it. This costs about $5 per gallon. So $5 for this, $2 to $3 for your airlock, about $1 worth of yeast. You're good to go. Under $10, you could probably make a good gallon of hard cider. So you'll probably go, you'll make your hard cider, it'll turn out great, you'll love it, and you're going to want to experiment right away. You're going to want to go out and you're going to want to try new things. And everyone I've taught pretty much has done this. They go out and they experiment with the process. They experiment with adding things. And then all of a sudden, batches start going sour on them. I've had them call me up, well, why does this taste weird? Well, what did you do? Okay, well, I started by, instead of using 1 step, I used bleach and water. Okay, anything else? Well, instead of using white table sugar, like you showed me, I used raw sugar. Okay, anything else? Well, I used hand-crushed apples, and I used, well, any one of those steps could potentially spoil your batch. I really recommend do this 10 times. Do this recipe 10 times before you modify something. If you modify something, modify one thing. Why I say do it 10 times first is because you want your process to be perfect. It's not the yeast. Use the same yeast all 10 times. Use the same juice all 10 times, the same container. If you have 10 successful runs, that means your process is perfect. You know how to sanitize. You know how to use your ingredients. You know what works. Then go and try something new. Maybe try a different yeast. If the batch doesn't turn out, then you know it's the yeast that caused the failure. Try a different juice, but you leave the yeast, your sanitizer, and your container the same. If something has an off flavor, chances are it was your juice. If you want to try adding a cinnamon sticks, I've had some success with that, adding cinnamon sticks inside there. It turns out delicious. But the first time I did it, the batch didn't work. It turns out I had to actually boil the cinnamon sticks inside some apple juice because the cinnamon sticks themselves had a lot of yeast on them that I didn't know about, had a lot of bacteria on them possibly that I didn't know about, soured the batch. I knew right away though when it didn't turn out it must have been the cinnamon sticks, so I had to try something else. So anyway, I'm going to put some other photos here and some other videos as this ferments out for the next week. It probably takes 5 to 7 days before this is ready to bottle and to enjoy. Now we could get a hydrometer. I do have one. We can test the alcohol level. I find in general this will give you about 8 to 11% alcohol by volume if you let this ferment out. So this will be a little bit stronger of a hard apple cider. I'll talk about here in just a minute about how you can kind of modulate that, make it so it's not as strong. It's quite simply just add less sugar, but do realize it's going to ferment out a lot quicker. So again, I'll put some other videos here showing this throughout the week, and then we'll do a video on bottling it a little bit later. So anyhow, watch out for the updates. I hope everyone's doing well. Stay safe out there, and we'll talk to you later.